321, I'm on scene. I'll be assuming Caroline Street Command. I got a 2.5-story wood occupied multiple dwelling. I got heavy fire from the second floor, Charlie side. I have an exposure on the Delta side. We have one line stretch not in operation yet. Primary searches are underway. Status of the fire is doubtful. One passing command. I'm on the first line. Service be advised. We're on scene. 2-story wood frame. I got heavy fire from the Alpha side.
Welcome back, Volley Chief fans. Coming to you today with our newest episode. I have a gentleman from Nebraska, so I can cross Nebraska off the 50-state list. I've traveled to Nebraska once. It was in the 90s during the heyday of Nebraska football. My cousin Steven went to school there, so that's my limited, I think I was there for a week, knowledge of Nebraska, other than the East Coast version of Nebraska just being all flat and grassland. But I know we talked about the myth of that too. So I guess today's Aaron. I'm going to turn it over, let him introduce himself, tell you a little bit about himself, and then we'll start talking about using technology to advance your volunteer fire service and the lack of technology in a lot of departments.
Right.
Aaron?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you having me, David. So my name's Aaron Hofeling. I joined Eagle Fire and Rescue just about five years ago. So we were laughing, prior to getting this started, that I moved out of the city, right? So moving outside of the city in Nebraska is typically either Lincoln or Omaha, and happened to find a small acreage, about 10 years ago, that's just smack dab in between Lincoln and Omaha. And long story short, saw a couple recruitment articles in the news, about people needing volunteers for their local volunteer fire stations, and so I decided to just go check it out. I lead a pretty boring desk life. I work from home most of the time, and I thought, what, this could be a way to kick up a little bit of adrenaline. Didn't know anybody out here, right? And so it's a pretty easy way to meet people, and I've met some of my best friends here. We, as you said, we are known as kind of the Flatlanders out here. It's mostly ag. So we got corn, soybeans, and it's pretty flat outside of a few rolling hills. We cover about 72 square miles is our district. Just like any other department, our the number of volunteers varies, right? So we've got 22 people actually on our roster. I think we actually just had 4 new guys complete their firefighter 1, but we got a good crew, and just like any other department, right? You got the folks that are very bought in, and some of them that you can expect them to turn out to about 20% of the calls. But yeah, absolutely love it. And like I said, I appreciate you having me here today.
Yeah, no problem. And your topic of choice was technology, and I think it's a great topic. Coming from my department, we're technologically challenged. The best that we offer, we just did the switch for obviously, like everybody, we were using Firehouse software for the longest time, and then we had to make the switch, and but that's it. For technology now, again, we have about 100 members, 4 stations. We protect the area of a whopping 5 square miles.
Wow.
And but our population is about 14 to 15,000 people, so it's a dense area for for us. There's not a lot of acreage, as you put it.
Yep.
Around here. But it was one thing when I was chief, we didn't even have, like, the city didn't even include us in their computer system. So it was 4, independent firehouses with 4 independent computers, 5 counting the chief's office. There was no network. There's nothing. I like technology. I'm a little bit of and I tried to come up with something. And to be honest with you, the best I could do was I created a Google Drive for the department, and I did it. We even did a lot of. I would upload policies. I had all that stuff uploaded to the cloud, and then this way, policy review, new policies, sign up sheets, things like that. I did Google Docs and Google Forms
Yeah,
to
Forms is the way I started, quite
okay,
honestly. Yeah,
yeah.
Google Form, everything was on Google Forms, everything's, so very, very similar story. So when I joined, like I said, about 5 years ago, I come from a technology background. So like I said, I lead a very boring day job. And they'd probably kill me if I said that, but it is. I mean, I'm in Excel spreadsheets most of the day. I do talent acquisition. So I run a team of 5 recruiters, and we do hourly hiring. It is sort of as mundane as it sounds, quite honestly. But I get to dive into a ton of different like SaaS software. I mean, we live and breathe in SaaS software. So when I joined the department, I was kind of floored, just like about the lack of technology, right? So we'd go do truck checks, and everything was done on pen and paper, right? And I think the most frustrating thing that I saw was we'd run through our truck checks, you know, what happens when you're done with pen and paper truck checks, right? It's in a binder. That binder gets put up on a shelf, right? You go to a call, all of a sudden something's missing from a rig, and you're like, hey, why wasn't this found when we just did truck checks? You go back to the binder, somebody did see it, but it just gets hung up on a shelf. So nobody was notified, or if somebody was notified, it might not have been the right person, or, it was forgotten about. And it was just like, yeah, I can't believe this is the world that we exist in today. I'm preaching to the choir here, but we in the volunteer world, money's pretty scarce, right? So at least for Eagle, we've got a really great rural fire board, that helps us out, but most of that money's going towards, maintaining our trucks, buying new equipment. So if we want, new radios, new pagers, new air packs, those types of things, we're either fundraising it ourselves, or we're going to an AFG or something similar to try to get grant money. But again, we would issue people with radios, pagers, bunker gear, all of this stuff, and people come and go, right? I mean, it's the world we live in. But a lot of these expensive assets were essentially walking out the door, and then we'd be like, oh, well, what did David have? Like, what did we all give Dave? Did he have a radio? Did he have a pager? Right? I don't know. And you just kind of hope and pray that you got all that equipment back. And so, I started looking into, different types of software. And there's nothing against, right, the ESOs, the PS tracks, like those guys are awesome. The technology's fantastic. The problem is, when we're fundraising once a year for, $17,000, to be able to slap down a third of that budget on software is not really realistic, which is why we were always just sort of on that pen and paper. So again, coming from a technology background, I just kind of thought, man, there's got to be something better that we can do. Did look at like Firehouse software, but I think at the time they were still like, it was still hardware, right? You still had to install it on a computer.
Firehouse, I mean, they transitioned to you could choose, you could buy the installed, or you could use a cloud base.
Okay.
And again, but if you want to use the cloud base, it's an upcharge. And like you said,
Yep.
when you have a finite budget, that's a thing that's going to get shot right away.
Yeah. So I decided to just, and after long conversations with my wife, of course, I decided, you know what? I think I want to just do something on my own. So I started a company in 2022 called Accelerant, that is specifically for the volunteer world. So it handles truck checks, it handles like asset management, it handles call logs, handles like basically training logs, and just continue to build it out over the course of over the last 2 years, but making sure it is affordable for volunteer departments. So as it sits right now, and I don't have any plans on actually changing it anytime soon, it's $120 a year for your department. And that takes care of everything. There's no additional cost for, the different modules, because I know that's another thing that these companies can get into as well. So it's like, okay, well, they charge you either per truck or they charge you per module. And I just want something that our like volunteers can use, that's affordable, easy to use, it's intuitive, and it ticks the boxes. We don't need all these bells and whistles that a lot of the software comes with.
Right. So like, obviously dabbling in my career job versus the volunteer world. In my career job, when we come in the morning, we have to enter our radio and enter our air pack into the computer
Yep.
that we inspected of. And it's annoyingly long. And that's the number one, feedback you get from the guys when you're like, hey, did you check your pack today? And everyone's like, oh, because it is, you have to go in, first you come in the morning, you have to log into the database. Then you have to log into the software. Then from the software, you have to go to inventory, from inventory to warehouse, warehouse to unit, unit to, and it becomes
It's complex.
a 15-step process.
Right.
And like my vision, and again, I only have limited time, and towards the end of my chiefdom, is when QR codes started becoming big. And like my vision was, there's got to be somebody out there that takes a QR code, right? Put it on a plate, put it on whatever, put it at that riding position. And
that's what I did.
And then you come in the morning, you come and do your truck check, you scan that riding position, it gives you the riding position, the air pack, the radio, if you're supposed to carry the hook and can, if you're supposed to carry the irons, whatever your job is, and that simple of a process. And I'm unaware of your product, so
that's all right. I mean, check it out when you get a chance. But that's
definitely said. I just felt like everything was over complicated.
I agreed. And so and you and I were talking. So when I started off, I'm like, I bet you I can shoestring, duct tape some of this stuff together and using like Google products, right? So it started off with Google Forms. So Google Forms was our truck checks for I'd say probably a year before I finally pulled the trigger and went to actually like a SaaS software. But QR codes was perfect too, because a QR code is not that complex. It's basically a picture that takes you to a URL. So and you just scan it with your phone. I'm probably oversimplifying it, but I mean, so in Accelerant, every truck, so it's not as complex as you said, where the different riding positions, and you basically scan it and it tees up everything. But maybe we'll get there at some point. But in the volunteer world, you don't have positions,
correct. That's,
really, right?
You don't have no. That's, and I agree, because like at work when I go in, it's like our positions are there's so many, because it's like you have your structure response, if you have a rope response, you have your but if I'm on an engine company, I'm not having all those different, I'm the nozzle guy and that's my job. I'm the nozzle person. I'm going to have the nozzle. So does the nozzle go like this? Yes. Okay. Good to go. But it would be funny, because guys I would bring up Google Drive or Google Forms, or I made a Google, like guys would roll their eyes.
Yeah.
And we had an OSHA inspection. I went through many OSHA inspections during my time, and OSHA came in, and that was one of the things they wanted to know, training records. Yep. And it was like, okay, well, let me go to the Google, and the OSHA inspector, I showed her what we had built, and they were actually, kind of laughing at how rudimentary it was. But on the flip side, when we implemented a new policy and you'd email out the Google form, and at the bottom of the Google form, you had that, put your initials in this box that says that you read and understand the policy, and then you can print all that out and hand it to the inspector. It's like, as dumb as this was, and as much as it was,
but it simplifies it. It's not dumb if it works, man.
No, it just saved you. Because again, a member comes in, they join, they get a set of turnout gear. You give them a form, they sign the form that they accepted the gear. You get a pager, you give them a form. 3 years later, they quit. Now you go into the record room that we have, and it's like, well, the last guy rearranged everything. The next chief already started cleaning files out. Now you can't find any of it. Right. And we actually had a situation. Someone put their gear on Facebook Marketplace.
Oh boy!
Right, like they belonged and they left, and and a time had gone by, like 3-4 years, and all of a sudden their gear popped up on Facebook Marketplace. It was like gear and a portable radio, and we were like, whoa, wait a minute, that's city equipment. That's you can't sell that. And over the time, there's actually even been members who left that we actually had to say to them, look, you're taking city equipment. If you don't return it, we're calling the cops.
We've had to do the same.
Yeah, and it's like, well, prove I haven't. I can't. I have no documentation. Or, you're up at the chief's office in a meeting and the guy comes in and says, hey, I need new gloves and a hood. And you're in the middle of doing 10 different things. So you hand it to him and you forget to fill out the form.
Yep.
And then, 3 months later, you're looking for stuff. You're like, why am I down a hood? Why am I down this? It just, like you said, apparatus checks, they were forms, they'd bring them to the monthly officers meeting and we'd stick them in a binder and, that would be it. And I
Yep.
mean, I think the one thing you forgot to mention, which is, I think, even more critical than the paper form, is the magic whiteboard.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Every firehouse has to
Mhm.
have that magic whiteboard that has
Or
what's,
3 of them.
yeah.
Yeah,
You
for
know,
sure.
and it's like, oh, hey, this is missing. Okay, did you check the book? No. Did you check the whiteboard? Aha, there it
Uh-huh.
is.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, to get back to the QR code, so it comes like, so when you add a truck, every truck comes with a QR code, right? And all you have to do is simply print it out. So we just went to like an office supply company and bought like a sticky paper. You print it out on the sticky paper, you cut out the QR code, you slap it on the inside of a truck door, and everybody, even our oldest member, Pops, who and obviously his nickname, but guy's 70 years old and he can work it. So I mean, it's not that hard. Pull it up on your, or pull up the camera on your phone, scan the QR code, boom, there's your truck check. What really started to get more complicated with the whole Google Forms is when you start talking about, I guess, different rules, right? How you want to disseminate that information, how you want to collaborate with that information too. And so I thought that was important because it's it's about accountability to a certain extent, right? Because you want to know who did the truck check to make sure it's being done correctly, right? And I think that if your name's tied to something, you're going to put more emphasis on it. You're going to pay closer attention. If this comes back to me, I'm gonna make sure this is done correctly. But at the same time, making sure that everybody that needs that information gets it. So once you hit submit, right, that information gets sent out to the officers, and you can actually, if you wanted it sent to the entire department, you could add the entire department to that list if you actually wanted to.
Yeah, because that's a big component. Because with Google Forms, as you know,
Yep.
you when you fill out a Google form, you have you have an option to receive an email anytime someone fills out the form. But
Correct.
only the maker is
Yep.
receiving the email. So now you're relying on the maker to push it out to everybody.
Exactly. Right. And then how do you work to remedy, right? Because in the volunteer world, we all have our daily lives that we
Right.
go about doing, right? So so I thought it was important, like, how do you start to collaborate to make sure that if there is something missing or broken, that you have the ability to communicate, not necessarily on a real-time basis, but it's pretty close. So once you submit a check, the very bottom of a check, there's actually kind of a chat at the bottom. So you could say, hey, does anybody know where the tick went? I can't find it. And then somebody's, oh, I think I saw it. It got left on a grass rig, right? Okay, I'll grab it off of there and throw it back on the engine, right? And so then you could start to collaborate, and nobody has to be at the station or calling people to figure out where it went. You can communicate, and once somebody submits comments, everybody's seeing the comments. You're getting notifications on those comments as well. So that's where, and it's it's been really fun, to be honest with you. I didn't think I actually started with just thinking this was going to be a truck check app, because that's kind of what the
Where you were
big
going
thing
with it?
was. Yeah, and then people like that, and they asked me to, hey, have you ever thought about adding X, Y, and Z? And
So
it's
you
been
you mentioned training, right? So
yep.
for us, training was everyone would come in. We had a triplicate, I don't want to say carbon paper and date myself, but
Yep.
you had like a carbon paper form everyone would fill out, and then the officers would have to go back, take the form, and then sit down, log in the firehouse, and manually enter everybody in
Hmm.
to training. And the same thing. I always said there's got to be an easier way to do this. There's got to be a way that we did do a couple Google Forms where we would have like we knew we were having a drill night coming up or having a speaker come in, so we would sit down and pre-make one up on
Yeah.
Google, and that way when everyone came in, say, okay, go to the Google Drive and
And
you know,
sign
send out
in
the link and
basically.
sign in basically.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I mean, and again, I'm probably going to say this a million times during this, but every department's different in terms of like your bylaws. So for us, we train once a month for fire, and we train once a month for rescue. And regardless of what you're on, you have to hit a minimum number of trainings, right? And so when I was thinking about the training module, you have to, of course, account for people, but you also need to see, like, at a glance, like, who's actually showing up for trainings too. That way you're not having to go into, again, these paper files and say, okay, well, David, how many trainings did he show up to? And you're flipping through papers and you're doing tally marks on a sheet of paper, right? You can just jump in. You can see at a glance, this is the number of hours we've had, for training at a department. David's shown up. So if we had 100 hours of training for the year, we can easily see that David showed up for 70. So you could look back at your bylaws. Okay, what number of trainings or hours did you need to have to either remain on the department or remain in good standing? And you can basically go through. And I think, again, it really falls back to accountability. So that information is not hidden from anybody either. So if you were on the department, you're like, crap, and listen, I miss trainings because of work. I have to travel every so often. But I can easily log in and just see, at a glance, how many trainings I've missed and where I kind of sit in terms of, remaining in good standing. So.
Yeah, now we actually get a tax abatement from the city. So there's this like overly complicated matrix on how many years you've been a member, what certification levels you have, how many calls you attend, how many drills you attend, how many meetings you attend. And like you said, something like that, it's every year, every March, the officers are sitting down and they're combing back through the minutes of their meetings, they're combing back through their paperwork to check names off that, this person met their quarterly drill requirement, or this
Yep.
person,
And it
so
also has to do with how many calls you show up to, right?
correct. Yep. There's and it's like, but so it's like if you've been a member for more than 25 years, like you get 20% of the abatement. If you've if you've done quarterly training, that's like another 10%. If you're fire 2, it's 10, like it all adds up.
Yep.
So yeah, I could easily, like you said, different departments, different, for us, it's a city ordinance giving the members of the fire department and the ambulance corps a tax break on their property taxes.
So Nebraska has something similar, but they give like a basically I think it's like a $200 tax credit, so not a ton, but $200 is $200, right? So and it's based off the same sort of stipulations. It's based off, and I don't know if they've got anything in there. I have to go back and look on years of service, but it is based off of you get a certain amount of points, right? So you get certain points for things. So if you make it to, like, I think it's like 20% of your department's calls for the year, that's an X amount of point. If you show up to X number of trainings, that's a certain amount of points, and you need a number of points in order to be eligible for that $200 voucher. So most of that information, I would say at least probably 90% of that, you can find pretty easily in Accelerant. And those are the things that I'm using to kind of shape how we're, how the next move, I should say, in terms of like a product update. The one feedback I do get is, hey, and I'll just take Nebraska for example. Hey, it'd be nice if we could track X, Y, and Z. Sure, it would be nice, but like, is that actually tangible for the rest of the 49 states out there? So that's a fine balance, because I'm not just going to add something that's specific to Nebraska or specific to Connecticut for that matter, because it's just going to get very confusing on, well, what the heck is that? So that's been challenging to kind of balance some of those requests, but again, it's been super fun.
Now, are you into all technology? I mean, the last bit of technology I attempted to get before my tenure was up was I was trying to start a drone program. for the area.
Okay.
And, you know, that to me, I think that's a huge future of the fire service is you know, the use of especially the unmanned aerial vehicles. You know,
Yep.
obviously we're in our towns and our districts, we're never going to see like you know, like New York City or even in Paris at the Notre Dame fire right there, the robot firefight. Like, I don't think we're going to see that.
Right.
But you know, I tried. I try to bring it up every once in a while to try to resurrect it. But I think that the use of drones is going to be a big
Huge.
technology change.
Yeah, huge. I mean, we've already seen it, right? So there's actually, and I'll have to go back. I'll try to dig it up. There's a company in Lincoln that just got a bunch of like startup money, and it is for fighting wildfires with drones. So essentially, and it's for like it's back burning, right? So this drone flies around that, you know, wherever they want to do that back burn, and it drops these pods. And once the pods hit the ground, these chemicals basically mix, and of course creates an ignition, and it's able to back burn in those areas. It's pretty crazy. And again, you know, I'll have to go back and figure out the name of the company, but I saw it and I was like, wow, that's really interesting. You know, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Because I do think, I mean, they're already doing drone. I've got a buddy that's on the department, and he was pretty serious about getting into drone, like the ag drone, you know, for spraying pesticides and insecticides and all, you know, all that good stuff. But how is that any different than putting water on a fire? Right. I know you're
Right.
not going to have the capacity, right? And that will be an issue in terms of how much water you could carry. But it seems like it would be pretty decent for flying and putting out some hot spots, or even just kind of some blanket coverage if you've got a small area.
We
So there,
we had a very large mill factory a couple summers ago, and one of you know somebody in the crowd, one of I think he might have even been a member of like a neighboring department that was there just buffing it, and he had a drone, and he was like, "Hey," he walked over to the command post and said, "You guys want to see the drone?" And we were all like, "Yeah." And as you know, as an officer, as an incident commander, it gives you a whole different view, you
perspective,
know,
yeah.
of the
Hmm.
scene. And you know, there's been a couple incidents, a couple of missing people. We had a person that, you know,
Yep.
that vanished on the riverbank, so now we got to check the river. They you know, they increase your manpower. They're really a force multiplier, and I just think that that's you know an area. I've got to find a drone guy to come on the show. You know, you know, and I
Well,
know they're out there. I know that
yep.
they're out there. There are, you know, some of our neighboring towns, some places have them, and even in Connecticut, there's a municipal UAV task force made up of fire, police, and EMS. And it's just to me like that's the technology. You know, next from there, obviously, we're going to move to Iron Man suits, right? We've been
Yeah.
saying that.
Yep.
You know, I remember in the '90s when they told us that everything would get smaller, lighter, and have more technology in it, and now everything seems to be getting bigger, heavier, with less
Yeah.
technology in
Right. No doubt. And then the
it.
technology that they put in, it sort of seems misplaced or
Yeah,
misguided in
yeah.
some instances. But yeah, I mean, listen, I'm fascinated with all things technology. You know, I think, what will be neat, and you've sort of seen that, I think, teased by like MSA, is some of like the heads up stuff. You know what I
Yes,
mean?
yeah.
Like, right. Um, yeah, right now we run G1s, and you know, I think it's cool just that we can see, you know, our oxygen levels with, you know, some little LED indicators. It'd be pretty sweet if you had some heads up display in your mask that
I
had.
always, like I said, I always envision the Iron Man. You know, one day
Uh-huh.
you're gonna put on your mask, and it's gonna have like a thermal and night
Yeah.
vision. It's gonna
I
have,
don't
you
think you
know,
need an entire suit. I think you need,
no, just
yeah, the
yeah,
mask part
yeah.
would be just a game changer if you were able to have thermal that you were seeing essentially
And
real time.
and don't get me wrong, like Scott's got the Scott sight, and I've
Yep.
had one, I've used one, and they're great. But now it's you got to turn one unit on, you got to turn the other on. The battery life
Yep.
wasn't as good as you'd want it to be.
Yep.
So you know the technology's there and it's coming along. It's just a matter of you know I think it's probably going to obviously like anything, it's going to come down to money because it's our
I was literally going to say the
yeah
same
you know
thing.
I
It's
mean
going to be ridiculously expensive and really out of touch for
yes.
the majority of us in the volunteer world, certainly. And there's probably not a ton of departments, full-time paid departments that would be able to afford it right out the gate. Yeah.
So Aaron, I like to keep the shows around 20, 25 minutes. We went over
Sure.
a little bit, but we were rolling. So the name of the software is Accelerant.
Yeah, you can go to
Software?
getaccelerant.com.
Okay.
I offer a 90-day free trial. And if you like it after that, certainly appreciate the support. It's only $120 for your department. That's no stipulation. That's a flat rate. And going to continue to build on it. So would appreciate anything that anybody that wanted to sign up. Happy to answer any questions too. So.
All right. And,
Cool.
again, Aaron, I thank you for being on today. Thank you everyone for listening. As a couple reminders, don't forget to like and subscribe. Make the machine work by subscribing. You allow my digital footprint to increase. We've got the ambulance driver 5K coming up in July. Going to be a good time here in Derby. So for everyone listening, there's a link in the bottom if you'd like to sign up to that. Aaron, thank you for being here. And
thanks for having me, David.
Yeah, we'll hear from you soon.
Sounds great. Okay. Cheers. Thank you.
FD1's back in service. Commands terminated.